Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the virtual event committing to women's leadership in peace building, bringing women peace and security, and the UN peacebuilding architecture closer together, which is hosted by the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict in collaboration with Canada, Permanent Peace Movement, the International Center for Conflict and Negotiation, and Women in Alternative Action. My name is Maja Vitas Majstorovic, and I will be moderating this event today. Thank you very much for joining. We encourage you to use the chat function to engage with each other, to ask questions during the whole event. However, we really want to have an interactive session. Therefore, we are asking you as well to take the floor during the second half of the session, and you can ask to come in either by raising hand or signing up to speak in the chat. This event is public, although it was requested to register for the event. We were hoping to live stream, however, there are some technical difficulties. Therefore, the recording will be available after we finish with the event. As we are public, you can live tweet, and we hope you will support our events in that form. If you want to use the hashtags we are using to promote the event, you can use hashtag WPS in 2020 or hashtag redesign the table. Before introducing our panelists for the day, I would like to pass the word to GPPAC's Executive Director, Darinel Rodriguez-Torres, for a few opening remarks. Darinel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maya. Can you everybody hear me?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks a lot. No, I'm very happy to be able to take part of this event and to see a lot of the friends that we have been working together in GPPAC over the past years. As you know, 2020 is really a remarkable year in terms of taking stock of where we are in fulfilling the global commitments to nonviolence and conflict prevention. Throughout all of this year, we had the 2020 review of the UN Peacebuilding architecture, which brought together member states, actors from the United Nations, different actors from regional organizations and civil society to reflect together on how the UN Peacebuilding architecture has come since the establishment of the Peacebuilding Commission. This review also coincides with the 20-year anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, which was a big commitment by world leaders on how to engage women peace builders throughout all the stages of the peace cycle. At GPPAC, we have been part of both of these processes, and we acknowledge that important progress has taken place, but we're also aware that we're still far away from where we need to be. And we need to be integrating these global commitments in a better way in order to transform the peace and security field and make it more inclusive, more proactive, more people-centered. And that this inclusiveness helps us to bring more success in the ground. 2020 is also an important milestone for GPPAC, for the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, as it is our 15-year anniversary of our global network. 15 years ago, our founders developed a global action agenda that outlined key priorities to bring that necessary shift from reaction to prevention, based on the promotion of human security and on the integration of gender equality, and bringing that gender perspective into all conflict prevention and peace building work. These priorities are today more relevant than ever. And the work that the GPPAC gender focal points have been doing throughout these years has contributed to really advancing these commitments and to really creating this link and mobilizing local capacities to connect better the work of the Security Council, the Peacebuilding Commission, and other peace and security actors within the UN system, and to foster the commitments to a people-centered approach at all stages of the peace cycle, at all stages of work, bringing together a gender equality perspective. Utilizing these local methodologies, we built on the synergies between women, peace and security and sustaining peace. And we believe that increasing and improving these efforts will ensure a better integration of the women, peace and security agenda in peace building and conflict prevention, increasing our joint capacities to prevent conflict and to increase human security at every level and for everyone. With that in mind, I hope that this event provides that opportunity to bring some reflections, some perspectives on how to advance and how to increase these linkages better and how to better promote the role of women peace builder leaders, and how can we as members of GPPAC contribute to that effort. So with that, I wish that we have the very fruitful discussions today, and I'll give it over to our moderator, Maya, so we can start with today's program. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words, Darnell. And just to say from my end, it's really remarkable to have male champions of gender equality as heads of organizations such as GPPAC. So very grateful for all of your support. Also, thank you for particularly pointing out the need to utilize more local methodologies in order to increase synergies between these agendas. And to understand fully where these local methodologies are coming from, I would now like to turn to our panel and to hear from our panelists today a little bit more about the context they're coming from. So now I would like to call Ms. Shireen Jordi, who is the GPPAC Regional Liaison Officer for MENA region from the Permanent Peace Movement in Lebanon, to take the floor. Shireen has many years of experience working with the nexus between academics and grassroots activism, women peace and security agenda, women substantive and representative participation, conflict resolution, transitional justice, and responsibility to protect. Over to you, Shireen.
Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you, Darnell. Good morning, good evening. Thank you so much for having me in such an inspiring event. It's really an honor to share my experience working with women in the MENA region for almost 15 years now, and in GPPAC starting March 2019. Well, in that journey, we understood that the implementation of the WPS agenda in MENA is not an issue of empowerment. It is an issue of listening and providing platforms for women peace builders to share their perspectives, knowledge, and experience. But yet, what we have seen happening, new spaces created in the aftermath of revolutions, curved and created by women. Women have took to the streets their demands and slogans of equality and state building, utilizing and lobbying, advocating through WhatsApp groups and social media platforms. Women have become the names of the change. In Sudan, there was Ala Salah and our GPPAC's Iman Youssef. In Lebanon, it was Malak Alawi and Lina Boubis, who is here with us in this event as well, among other women who called for nonviolent revolution. In these spaces, we as GPPAC in MENA region, we nurture and advance principles of conflict prevention, human security, and human rights. Recognizing these women's transformative capacity, we formed a coalition to support stakeholders to identify root causes and address the key challenges. We have women from Syria, from all over Syria, within Syria, from Lebanon, Iraq, Palestine, Jordan, Oman, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Sudan, Egypt, and Libya. However, what do we see in spaces such as peace processes that are everywhere in the MENA region? Women formed as technical advisory groups in Syria and Yemen that sidelines women's perspectives and make them an add-on. And we have seen that this approach is not working. We have seen that the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, which is the DDR processes, are also putting women aside and are actually gender blind and do not prioritize creating opportunity. For example, lately, as we see with the Libyan women and Libyan people. So the absence of women results in the proliferation of arms, growing levels of violence, and representative and uninformed with local data processes to resolve conflicts. So I'll end with that and to listen to our colleagues. We come back with future and upcoming points.
Thank you so much.
Maria.
Yes, thank you so much, Shireen, for this introduction. And from Lebanon, we are moving across half of the world to Georgia, to Nina Tikishtavi-Kutishvili, Director of International Center on Conflict and Negotiation, ICCN, Georgia, who is also GPPAC's regional representative in the South Caucasus. And she has been working in the field of peace, conflict resolution, and promoting nonviolent approaches to disputes through gender equality, human rights approaches, at the same time as advocating for women's rights since 1996. Very grateful to have you with us today, Nina.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am here to speak from Georgia right now, and let me address our community, ladies and gentlemen. We joined today's event to discuss the particular things around us, in fact. And let me remind that when His Excellency Guterres called upon the world leaders for a global ceasefire this spring, nobody drew attention in a respective way. In July, clashes started between Armenia and Azerbaijan that were followed with the September 27th. And today we live with the fact that we are in the face of increased resumption of armed conflict in South Caucasus. Constant escalations and clashes, armed conflicts and wars have been challenging the region for the past 30 years. I have to state that both formal and informal infrastructures for peace established and built in South Caucasus are being unable to resist or combat military actions in the absence of meaningful civil society inclusion in the peace processes. The Minsk Group, as the main established negotiation format for the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, worked at the track 1 level, but unfortunately with no compliance with local peace-building processes. Official negotiations are isolated and distant from entire civil societies, peace builders and national mediators. However, with the absence of local peace builders from the discussions and without local peace building expertise, the Minsk Group format misses key components that a more inclusive expert-level dialogue would offer. The development of jointly agreed decisions would encourage joint ownership and human security principles. Frustrations caused by non-participation and exclusion forced us to establish the network of women mediators of South Caucasus in 2017 in response to 2016 clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan. However, we are really struggling with operationalizing it in the absence of adequate funding and political support. I would probably stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina, for explaining the context you're coming from. And also, I'm very much looking forward to hear a bit more on what women mediators are doing currently in the context of South Caucasus and what kind of support they need. Before turning to you with these questions, I would now like to take us to Cameroon, to Ms. Kandemeh Peaceful Meng, who is the program coordinator of Women in Alternative Action, a Cameroon-based organization which advocates for women's human rights and promotes the rights of women and girls to participate in peace-building processes in Cameroon and the region. Over to you, Peaceful.
Thank you very much, everybody. As a young female peace builder, I worry about my country, Cameroon, which has witnessed for the past 2 decades a series of very violent political clashes and armed conflicts that have in a way undermined undermined a country which was formerly known as a haven of peace and of human security in the Central African region. The most recent is what has been dubbed as the Anglophone Crisis, blamed on its perpetrators on several years of marginalization and feeling of frustration over the past 5 years. This crisis has brought untold sufferings to the youth, most especially the female youths, and the population of these regions, with thousands of them having moved to neighboring regions. The protraction of this crisis is not only affecting property and human life, but also hindering national development and the achievement of SDG 16+, which is sustainable peace. The crisis in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon is only a reminiscence of no other crisis across the country that have had serious negative impact on Cameroon's development progress. The war against the Boko Haram, I think most of you know about it, in the grand northern regions of our country is another example of a conflict which has deployed the government has deployed enough of its resources and diplomatic means to contain the violence. In both of these armed conflicts, women and girls have remained the prime target and have suffered, particularly in the sphere of gender-based violence and sexual violence, which has led to thousands of the girls being internally displaced, others forced into prostitution or child marriage to survive and take care of their families. Within the context of this crisis, Women in Alternative Action has been working to complement government efforts to end the crisis by engaging with different stakeholders at the community level, national and international levels to build open spaces for women's participation in peace building processes. Thank you very much. I'll end here for now.
Thank you so much for that context, Peaceful. And I must say, working with GPPAC's Gender Focal Points for many years now, it is a great pleasure to have more and more young women coming into these spaces and discussions from their own perspective and sharing this incredible experience. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you're addressing some of the challenges in the second part of the session. Finally, from Cameroon, we take the panel to Fiji, where it's very late in the night. So once again, thank you, Mariani Nawadra, from the Pacific Conference of Churches in Fiji, for staying up this late to join the discussion today. Mariani is a passionate advocate for human rights of women and girls, as well as prevention of sexual and gender-based violence in the context of Fiji and the Pacific Islands. She has taken her extensive experience of working with women at the community level into the regional context when she started to work with the Pacific Conference of Churches. Over to you, Mariani.
Thank you so much, Maya, and Bulavinaka, everyone, or hello. So my name is Marian Nawandra, and I'm the ecumenical enabler for a program that has been introduced to Pacific Conference of Churches, and that's in partnership with UN Women. And it aims to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls, as violence against women and girls is a central barrier to gender equality and the cause of widespread violation of human rights across the Pacific. The Pacific Conference of Churches has come on board as a key strategic regional partner for UN Women under the Pacific Partnership Program. This is a significant achievement as Pacific Conference of Churches is a key influencer in the region, and as only regional faith organization representing all Christian faiths in the Pacific within 31 member churches, with significance as to 90% of the Pacific identifies as Christians, and also including that, just to add on, with 9 council churches. So I'll just stop there for now. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Mariani. And as you have all heard, we have quite a geographic diversity here, which really illustrate how women across the world have joined for over 20 years now to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda. They have been building sustainable peace in their communities for many more years, so even much before than the resolution 1325 was adopted. But it really helped their activism and also visibility of their efforts to build sustainable peace in their communities across the world, within their countries, within their regions. However, to zoom in a little bit more on the current challenges and how they are addressing these challenges, but also what kind of support they're expecting to get from the international community, from the UN and UN agencies, from the member states that are supporting peace builders in their regions, or that are any different kind of actors in the context of peace and security. We would like to dive in a little bit more into the content. So with this, I would like to turn to Shireen to ask you, considering you're coming from a region where multiple peace processes are taking place, what are you currently seeing in these peace processes, and what do you need to take your work on women, peace and security, gender equality further in order to sustain peace in the MENA region? Over to you, Shireen.
Thank you, Maya. That's really interesting, especially like now with the ceasefire agreement. And that's why I would like to focus maybe today. And I take this opportunity to shed the light on the issue and the case of Libya, since there is a renewed opportunity with the women special representative. We believe that a change can happen, and this interlinkages between the WPS agenda, sustaining peace, peace processes, inclusion, can be done if we can have 3 points, let's say. First, we need to recognize that women are not a homogeneous group, and therefore it is important that diverse women are meaningfully included in the peace processes as experts at the table and not as technical advisors. Second, to stop the continuous influx of weapons and foreign intervention in Libya, it is time for people of Libya to be part of the dialogue. Third, like regarding all the laws and policies, including the DDR that dictate the future of Libya, should integrate a meaningful gender analysis, which is absent at large. So for me, I think recommendation that falls within what is our expectations, needs, and calls for the UN, the country states, maybe the international community, first maybe to invest in and provide political support for women's political participation in peace processes. I mean, it's time for the UN to refuse to participate in peace processes that do not have women involved meaningfully and substantively. Second, also the UN should better support data collection on risk and resilience factors to better understand the needs of communities on the ground. This should also include mapping of the activities that are already taking place, and to build on these practices to make these efforts more sustainable for women. Third, we should not forget that peace starts at home and in our communities. Therefore, we need to focus on having communities able to be part of the state building, part of the DDR processes also need to enable proper reintegration, proliferation of arms must stop, infrastructures of peace, as Nina was saying, that enable community actors to do their work should be developed. I think if we are able to do this, to really participate, women who are actually there, they are meeting with the special representative. We just need them not to be at the technical part. We need them to be at the table. I think this is the main points that I would really want to raise in terms of women, peace, and security at this point. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you for that, Shireen, and for those relevant key messages and recommendations that you are bringing into the discussion today. It is a situation that we are following very closely on the news, but it's very different to hear a perspectives of a practitioner on the ground, and going to a different difficult situation, which has currently escalated. Nina, we have been watching the unfortunate developments in Nagorno-Karabakh over the past month, which brought more attention to your region. However, the work of women peace builders, despite lack of attention in the region of South Caucasus, has been ongoing, and it has never stopped. Despite all the challenges that we have been discussing over the years. However, how is the current escalation affecting your work, and what kind of support you and the network of women mediators of South Caucasus are expecting to be able to sustain peace in the South Caucasus?
Thank you, Maya. I wish we have peaceful reasons to have attention on my region. We all are upset and so sorry. At the end, the war proves again and again and again that we cannot sustain the impact of all measures taken by the civil societies toward the confidence building and peace processes. They worked through ages for that direction. We cannot prevent any sudden and forced abolishment of all infrastructures for peace, which was being built for decades. Today, we just can only assume that the call on a global ceasefire made by His Excellency Guterres is to be interpreted in a way that we all are responsible for reparation of ruined infrastructures for peace. National peace mediators, governments, and the third-party mediators, as three integral pillars of peace process, have to act complementary to each other. Established peace process shall guarantee inclusive and meaningful negotiations and dialogues, where civil societies are engaged and participate before, during, and after the conflict. And of course, we have, last not least, but particular recommendation to the UN organization. UN should pay due attention to the South Caucasus right now. Now it needs to set up ad hoc working group and definitely engage civil society and government representatives both, and identify urgent actions for recognition of national peace builders and for reparation measures for ruined infrastructures for peace, so that established peace process guarantees inclusive and meaningful negotiations with participation of national mediators, such as those gathered in our network of women mediators of South Caucasus. So we have more practical and maybe emotional recommendations as well, but we need immediate actions and urgent steps to be taken. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Nina, and also for sharing your recommendations. It is really relevant to learn also one more time, unfortunately, from this example, how fragile are those infrastructures for peace, and how investing in those infrastructures needs to happen before the actual escalation of conflict. It is said that women are sustaining peace each day in the communities, preventing the resurgence of violence and armed conflict. So, Peaceful, turning to you, in what ways have women been organizing and localizing women peace and security agenda in Cameroon, in your community, in the context of work of women in alternative action?
Okay, thank you very much, Maya. I would like to say that as a young peace builder, young female peace builder working with women in alternative action, which is a women's human rights organization that has leveraged several actions that seeks to enhance its 5 key areas of work, which include women and girls' human rights, gender justice, economic empowerment, peace building and conflict resolution, and constitutional law. To achieve all of this, we have been working alongside stakeholders who promote and implement Resolution 1325. For example, we have the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and the Family, which is a ministry that implements the government's commitments in Resolution 1325. We have also been working in close collaboration with traditional and religious authorities. And we know us in Africa, we respect our tradition very much. So working with these traditional and religious authorities is very essential for local peace building and for the presence of women in the peace building processes at the local level. And to sustain peace and preventing the resurgence of violence and armed conflict in our society, our focus has been on traditional and religious leaders and youth empowerment. Growing up in Cameroon, I've seen the respect accorded to wives of traditional leaders. So it really pleases my heart that Cameroon took the initiative to bring together wives of traditional leaders and female traditional leaders in an association called the Queens for Peace International, which is a network that will advocate for community peace and cohesion and educate and empower each other to advocate in their respective community on women's rights, the abandonment of harmful practices, and promotion of positive and empowering values and practices. The Queens for Peace movement contributes to address the community key problems. That is, if not solved, will continue to maintain the use of harmful practices such as child marriage and increases the gender gap and promotes discrimination of women in Cameroon. Within this context of the ongoing conflict in the North and the Southwest region, Women in Alternative Action has joined forces with women leaders and women-led organizations of the North and the Southwest region to through a coalition called the Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force, and our main objective is to contribute significantly in resolving the conflict and ensure women's meaningful participation in decision-making. For me, as a young peace builder, I see it and it encourages me because I think that my elders and my mothers are going ahead of me. So it encourages me as a young peace builder to join them and give my own voice. And I would like to say that as a young woman in peace building, I find youth alternative programs aimed at capacity building of young people incredibly relevant. So we have been working on so many levels to engage traditional and religious leaders to create community coexistence and eliminate the factors of frustration that undermine youth progress, promote violence, including injustice from chronic poor governance, corruption in public places, lack of legitimacy, marginalization, discrimination, ethnicity, identity-related issues, and frustration for many of these educated youth who have no job which has led to their radicalization. So with this, I would like to say that it is very, very important there is a very important need for proper documentation and that data collection on local peace building infrastructure, as well as knowledge for peace building that can be shared amongst local peace builders in every community of the world, meaning information sharing is very, very important at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those words, Peaceful, and also for pointing out how the local and traditional structures are supporting but also undermining peace in your context, and how relevant it is to have actual data to know how these processes are going in order to support the efforts of the local peace builders and local women peace builders on the ground. Speaking about about traditions and their contribution to peace and conflict prevention and prevention of violence in different contexts, I would now like to turn to Mariani to hear a little bit more about how the Pacific Conference of Churches and her work within this organization has been investing in sustaining peace in Fiji, but also wider in the context of the Pacific Islands. Over to you, Mariani.
Thank you, Maya. For us here in the Pacific, with Pacific Conference of Churches, the focus is around, rather from approaching it from a biblical perspective. This is towards churches and engaging with our own communities from the churches. And so working around with that and also just seeing what has been done and what needs to be done more. So we realize that this has, the language around peace building and speaking on women, peace and security, it has been, the language about it has been localized, or localized agenda, because we see the need to invest in the prevention of peace building every day, especially here in the Pacific. So our engagement and moving forward is actually creating more awareness within church spaces about opening dialogue and having safe spaces to discuss gender-based violence within our own churches. Here in the Pacific, it is a big issue, big influence for us here in the Pacific is our religion and also our culture. And these two tend to come over one another when in terms of dialogue, and how our church leaders can also be more understanding about how to interact and how to actually create awareness from pulpits within our own churches in the Pacific. So for us, it's more focusing around just trying to end violence against women, but from a biblical perspective, and also how much of how we have, or the church leaders have been talking about or interpreting the Bible for a long time now, but we are actually starting to create, or maybe perhaps reinterpret of how men look at women within communities, within churches, within their own homes. So for us, it's more of that focus, and also trying to engage within our 31 member churches, just creating that space in able to be talking with women and opening conversations, opening safe spaces for these conversations to take place for us here within the Pacific Conference of Churches. So perhaps I'll just end there for now.
Thank you for your intervention, Mirani. And looking at our four very powerful panelists coming from very different contexts, we can discuss how different and their contexts are, but they do have many joint points that they share together. One is for sure their activism and their dedication to women empowerment, to the empowerment of girls as well, to the building the sustainable peace in their communities, but also sharing these experiences from their years of experience in peace building across the world through our network, and really learning from each other, but also seeking support from both other civil society colleagues, but to our context, more importantly, from member states, from UN agencies, and recommending how we can all work together more effectively in the context of their communities to build sustainable peace, to contribute to those infrastructures for peace, but also to increase synergies with women, peace and security agenda, so they at the end are much better supported to do the work they want to do and to bring peace into their communities. Before opening up the discussion, I would now like to turn to Vanessa Wyatt from the Permanent Mission of Canada to the UN for a few reflections on what we heard from the panel today. I know this has been a lot, Vanessa.
Sure if I have exciting announcements from Canada, but thank you so much. We're very pleased to have the opportunity to co-host this important discussion, and thank you so much to all the panelists, particularly those of you who are up late or up early. I think the diversity of the experiences, as you just mentioned, Maya, reflects how important it is that we actually take the time when we're talking about particular contexts to speak to women about the realities of their lived experience in these contexts. But as you said, also the commonalities of this agenda and kind of all of the research, all of the evidence, and all of the experience that's informed the frameworks that we have now and that we basically now have to implement. You know, as you all may know, Canada currently chairs the Peacebuilding Commission, which is an intergovernmental platform at the UN designed to bring kind of sustained attention, political accompaniment, and advocacy to countries at risk of lapsing into conflict or relapsing into conflict. And, you know, over the years, I think the PBC has grown to realize that one of its important roles is to ensure that discussions on peace building and decisions about peace building are more inclusive. And so in 2016, the PBC adopted a gender strategy to guide its work. And under our chairmanship this year, we've been leading a process to actually examine how well we're doing. And a lot of the comments and statements that have been made today really, I think, illustrate for us how much work we still have to do as a UN body in taking the time to really not just to move beyond talking about how important this agenda is and look at how we can systematically integrate gender analysis into our discussions and advice, how we can ensure that that gender analysis is intersectional and reflects the experience of women in all their diversity in different settings, and how we can ensure that that once we hear this analysis and advice, that it's actually then integrated into our own decisions and advice that, you know, for example, that the PBC reflects to the Security Council. So we've had a study this year that kind of took a look both through desk research and interviews at how well we're doing, and it found that, you know, we've definitely gotten better. We've gotten better about ensuring that when we talk about peace building, we talk about the importance of women's political participation and leadership, that we include more women and more civil society actors in our discussions, but that we have a lot of work left to do, and specifically about in having an analysis about in that gender analysis in all of our discussions, and then actually following up on the types of recommendations that we make and the types of engagement that we have. And so on the basis of this study that the PBC requested and that the Secretariat produced, we are now working on an action plan, the aim of which essentially is really as an accountability framework for us as a UN body to hold ourselves accountable for doing the things that we said we would do when we developed this strategy, and specifically to be much more systematic about requesting a gender analysis from every briefer that we engage with, not just inviting a woman civil society representative to brief the commission and ask for her gender analysis, but actually to when we invite representatives from the World Bank or the African Development Bank to ask for their gender analysis, when we talk to different parts of the UN system, not just UN Women, but the Department of Peace Operations or UN Development Program or Department of Political Affairs, to really systematically seek out that analysis, to not let it be acceptable that we have a discussion that isn't informed by that analysis, and then to reflect that in our advice in a way that's much more specific and concrete than just talking about the importance of the agenda. I think the other thing that we're going to try and do with this action plan is develop some metrics, and so that we can monitor how many different meetings we hold in which there's a gender analysis and advice, how many different actors we consult with, what's the follow-up with their engagement, and how can we ensure that this is more systematic. I think one of the challenges that we face as a UN body, and that every part of the UN faces, is also very well reflected by the briefers we have today, which is that, of course, we deal with member states, that the PBC very much engages with national governments on the basis of their nationally owned peacebuilding priorities. And so where I think the UN really needs to move, and where the Peacebuilding Fund has helped move in this direction, is really how do we engage as kind of the international community with all of the work, the peacebuilding work that's being done at the community and local level. And this is, in many ways, this is where the work led by women and also by youth is happening, but it's broader than that, because I think in many countries, the politics that are responsible for the conflict are the product of competition between elites over access to power and wealth, and the work that is being done to build community resilience, to prevent conflict, to build social cohesion, to sustain peace, is being done at the local level, at the local and community level. And so the more we start engaging with the actors who are the solutions to the problems instead of the ones who are causing the problems, I think overall we're going to have a more successful approaches, and hopefully be able, through the platform that we offer and through the visibility that we offer, be able to really support those efforts that are happening at the local level. I know I have a chance to come in at the end, so I'll stop here, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for those reflections, and also for pointing out the plan for the Peacebuilding Commission. I'm very excited to see how this action plan comes to reality, and how actually local civil society will be able to benefit from its implementation. So thank you once again for sharing that point. Vanessa, indeed, we'll come back to you at the end, but now is the time to open up the floor for a discussion. In the previous events that GPPAC hosted on women, peace and security, we had very interactive discussion. So I really am inviting all of you to come into the space and look at the key questions that we asked also in the concept note. They are on the screen, so I don't want to read them out loud. They're there for everybody to see, but maybe just reflecting on some of the points that came from Vanessa on the actual capacities that are needed to strengthen better collaboration and coherence between the two frameworks on the ground in relation to the work of local women peace builders, youth peace builders, overall, because we do know that often at times, I mean, we see it also today with Mirani online after 1 a.m. her time, that they work themselves to the great extent to bring peace into their communities. So also looking at these questions, I would like to maybe hear from some of you how to support that work and also to mainstream it into different agendas more efficiently. At the start, just before I open up for those of you that wanted to speak, I want to release the results of the poll that we did at the beginning. The question was, what is needed to ensure better integration of women, peace and security agenda in peace building? So you can now see the results on the screen. However, now I'm turning to the panel, and I saw in the chat that Asma wanted to come in, so please do so. You need to unmute. While we are waiting for Asma to come into this discussion, I would.
Hello, I think I finally mentioned to unmute myself. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, everyone, depending on where all of us are. I think it's a very important topic of involving women in both the peace building processes, in ensuring peace, in peace negotiations processes, also in humanitarian actions and recognizing their role. I here would also mention that, women is not a homogeneous group. There are women with disabilities, and I think actually in some of the research, there have been recommendations on paying more attention to women with disabilities. Because, and again, intersectionality has mentioned here a few times. So it's important because a lot of times people with disabilities in general and women as well are as affected, if not more affected by the conflicts, because they a lot of times are being left out without assistance due to the emergencies. They're lacking the services that they need, maybe assistive devices. They lack the training on how to, let's say, get to a shelter, how to protect themselves a lot of times. But then also it's that a lot of people do earn disabilities due to conflicts. And then finally, it's also that the disability is often viewed as a politically neutral topic. So when we talk about reconciliation and confidence building and peace building, it's from my own experience, because I also have a disability. Meeting some people who are, let's say, on the other side of the conflict, because this disability topic is considered politically neutral, it's easy to use this topic. It's considered pretty professional, and it's easy to use it to start the discussion, at least. And then also, again, a lot of people are more vulnerable in the conflict situations due to their disabilities. I actually have, as former schoolmate from the conflict affected area from Georgia, and when everyone else was not able to pass the exams, all other youngsters from her region to enter Georgian universities, the government decided that for them, they would enroll them without the exams. They made an exception. But because she had to study in Tbilisi in the specialized school, so she did not graduate it in the conflict zone. She graduated from Tbilisi school. Because obviously there are no inclusive education possibilities, nor in the mainstream school, nor in specialized school on the conflict affected territories here in Georgia. And this is why she had to live in the boarding school and she had to move. It does not mean that she actually lived in Tbilisi because her family never moved. She was just studying here. And then upon her graduation, she still returned back home and lived there for 1 year. But the legislators really did not take into consideration that, you know, some of the youngsters living on the conflict affected territories willing to study might have disabilities, might be studying on the Georgian controlled territories in the specialized schools due to their disability and only because of their disability. And this is why they put the limitation that you had to actually leave and study and you had to actually graduate from the school located in the conflict zone, which she was not. So she has been denied a possibility essentially to enter university, because then, you know, the decisions regarding her were to like prolonged. It took too much, and now they told her that she could continue her studies from next semester onwards. But it actually might discourage her family from because it's very hard to support and pay for two girls, her and her sister, living here in Tbilisi from the conflict zone, where obviously the income possibilities are not as many as, let's say, here. And plus, because she has disability, again, it's additional, let's say, burden on her sister to still take care of her, and she still is not studying. So it actually might discourage her family from supporting her studies, and they might just say, okay, why does it matter? Like, you most likely are not going to get a job, so we'll just have you come back home and stay here, and I don't know, someone maybe will feed you for the rest of your life. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Asma, for coming in and for bringing in also those really relevant points on women and girls with disabilities that they are facing in relation to particularly situations of conflict and violence. So thanks for joining us today. Agnieszka, I see your hand is up, so please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Maya, and thank you, GPPAC, for convening this great conversation. And yeah, thanks to all the speakers, and especially to Esma. Thank you so much for raising that important point and you know, giving such clear examples of why the inclusion of women with disabilities is critical. I just wanted to share maybe 2 or 3 thoughts that came to me as the speakers were speaking in relation with the questions you posted on the screen, Maya, as well. So first, just a very brief mention, right, in terms of what are the normative and practical limitations of the Women, Peace and Security agenda and what are the other frameworks we could use. I wouldn't necessarily say limitations of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. It is an extremely comprehensive and broad agenda now with 10 resolutions, and you know, we certainly don't have any shortages in that regard. And what I think is quite remarkable as well is that, you know, without the need for more resolutions, more documents, more normative framework, the interpretation and the, you know, the normative sort of reach or scope of the agenda is actually evolving and growing through the work of women on the ground, right? By imbuing it with more understanding of the sort of holisticness of the agenda, of the sort of human security approaches to the agenda being key, and the preventative approaches, and not just the sort of securitized interpretation of the implementation. But having said that, it is useful to sort of intersect it with other existing normative frameworks. And of course, the Sustaining Peace resolutions are one where I think they really bring out that core importance of conflict prevention, and the Youth and Peace and Security resolutions are the other. So that's something I wanted to mention. I think that's a critical, you know, connection to be made as well, that some of the speakers have mentioned too, in terms of, you know, young women facing that double marginalization as young people and as women, and at the same time, you know, both young women and men being disproportionately or differently, right, affected by conflict because of their gender, by conflict and by other forms of violence. And we are seeing it so clearly with for example, the ongoing protests in Nigeria and the police brutality that has been taking place there, which is certainly gendered and certainly targeting young people more. So yeah, the importance of YPS as an additional normative framework is something I wanted to mention. And then maybe just a reflection on the outcomes of the survey that showed up on the screen. Very interesting. And I had such a hard time to pick just one of those options. And the main reason for that is how closely interconnected they are. And in particular, the option that I think won, which is more meaningful engagement with women's organizations, which I know is also one of the recommendations of the review of the Peacebuilding Commission gender strategy, right? That more diverse engagement. And what sort of immediately struck me or came to my mind is how strongly that is linked with the first option, which was the funding for women's organizations. And this is something that we've heard again and again from our partners, but that came particularly strongly in the consultations we did earlier this year to inform the Peacebuilding Architecture Review, that being, coordinating and sort of, creating these women's networks and women's movements and, to be able to participate in these kinds of consultations, right, or meaningfully participate, or do a joint civil society input into the consultation, etc. All of that requires funding and importantly core funding, right? Because it's not that we just provide funding when the consultation comes and we'll give a little money for people to be able to travel, to be able to meaningfully participate in different types of consultations or common country analysis. It's important to support women's organizations to be able to develop their networks, develop their strategies, etc. Document their work so that they can share it when the time comes. So that core funding, I think, is inseparable from meaningful inclusion participation. And the really last point I want to say is something Vanessa said about accountability, or I think the way you put it was, it shouldn't be possible or acceptable anymore, right, not to have that gender analysis in any of the processes linked to peace building. And I do think there are opportunities now coming up for strengthening that accountability, let's say infrastructure, right? For stronger gender analysis and peace building. We know the Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action was just launched yesterday, and accountability for women, peace and security specifically is one of its goals, but also the Peace Building Architecture Review, which is still not done, offers an opportunity to sort of highlight the importance of accountability for these promises, because I do think we really have such strong normative frameworks now. What we need is implementation, and to me that always means money, because we're always, our partners are always struggling, and that also means accountability. So yeah, I'll stop here, and thanks so much again.
Thank you so much, Agnieszka. It's always a pleasure to hear points coming from GNWP as you really live and breathe this work, but also particularly I think what we share is to how much we insist on accountability for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, but to your point on resourcing, I think as well that is the key. As you have said very eloquently, the work is not just when we organize these consultations, but in order for women peace builders to actually do the work in their communities every day and to have something meaningful to bring to those consultations, their work needs to be resourced on a daily basis, and the kind of resources they need are flexible and accessible funding that are easy to administer. So to that point, actually, it's a very nice segue to the next person who raised her hand. I saw Sophie from the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund wanted to say a few words. So over to you, Sophie.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Agnieszka. I think as you were speaking, I was checking my boxes as in like, okay, I wanted to say that. Now, what am I going to say? But these were all super important points. And I think also strengthening the localization of this agenda is something that must be a priority, especially when we think about sustaining peace. and therefore also looking at the types of funding that are provided. And so the types you mentioned also, Agnieszka, the core funding as being essential, and we've seen that very much in the past year, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. We did a survey with our grantees, and we found out from that survey earlier this year, so I cannot imagine how these numbers would have already increased if we would redo the survey today. But at the time, so in April, 30% of our grantees felt that their organization was at risk in terms of their existence because of the funding being redirected to other areas or organizations, larger organizations, and the COVID-19 crisis. So the work on WPS must be sustained, and that includes also quality funding for the organizations themselves to sustain themselves, and we cannot go backwards and lose their precious presence in so many geographical areas that need them. So that's one thing. But then I also heard throughout the event a lot of emphasis around the participation of women in peace processes. And I think what we try to do with the fund this year as well, and in response to the SG's recommendation, is really looking at the type of funding that is available already for women to support their participation and influence in peace processes. And often that type of funding that is already existing is quite longer projects, broader comprehensive approaches to it, but looking from a very kind of technical standing point, as in there is a talk and the women are still not there, and that is the reality. What do we do? So the rapid response window that we opened recently for women in peace processes tries to address these kind of remaining gaps, and I'm not saying that it will repair any of the other barriers that we still face today, but trying to provide a different type of funding, which is direct support, which means any kind of logistical, technical support that women need in a very short time frame to strategize and influence or participate directly in peace talks. And this is recently launched last month, but this is also showing how there are still remaining gaps in terms of how we can support women within these processes. And at the same time, the broader kind of change of the structures and the barriers is still not happening. And so we're still having this discussion still today, and we're providing these alternative kind of solutions, but it's not really addressing yet the whole issue of women's participation. And then another type maybe of funding. So of course, looking at the sustainability agenda as well, is bringing in both the WPS and YPS agenda as intersecting and reinforcing each other rather than as competitive agenda in the financial or funding area. And we often see discussions around this as in, there is competitive, people can see this as a competitive agenda or competitive agendas, but yet in practice, we see with our grantees and the local women and youth working on the ground, they often work already together. And these agendas are intersectorally linked and applied and contribute therefore to the sustainability of the actions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that intervention, Sophie. And indeed, looking at the rapid response window and how quickly it developed after the recommendation of the Secretary General last year, I'm really eager to see the impact of that fund in a sense of how much it will actually support women's meaningful participation in the peace processes, but looking even wider, how it may inspire other donors to support similar participation of women and also building their capacities in the long run. I noted 3 people wanted to come in for the time being, and we have about 10 minutes left for the discussion. So I'll just announce the order right now. So I have seen Justine wanted to come in. After Justine, it's Nina and then Daniela. So if anybody else would like to take the floor, now would be the time to let me know, so we can do a little bit of timekeeping. For those of you that are coming into this space on a little bit irregular basis, you can also say where you're coming from, your name and organization. So please, over to you, Justine.
Thank you very much, Maya. Thank you to the panelists. It was a rich discussion, and I have learned a lot from the cross-regional presentations. And I just want to my name is Justine, like you rightly said, and I work for Women in Alternative Action in Cameroon. My input will be on, based on the presentation of Shireen. She mentioned the ecumenical perspective of women's participation in women peace and security programs. And I wish to say that in Cameroon, it is even more stronger here, where we have women's groups of the different churches coming together with a focus on advancing peace within their homes, communities, and the society at large. So we have, for example, the Christian Women Fellowship, the Catholic Women Fellowship, the Baptist Women Association. All of these women's groups are working to enhance peace building within their families and their communities. And I want to say here that women's work on peace building is vast, and by their nature, women are peace builders. But what I think is that their efforts are not fully documented. Coming to talk about local peace infrastructures, if you go down to the local grassroots level, you'll find that there are various women's groups doing work that is contributing to the community peace, but it's not documented. So I think there'll be need for proper mapping of infrastructure for peace within the community level. And I want to say that, well, women have been working a lot. And in Cameroon, it's quite frustrating to know that working towards peace building for the past 4 years, when the crisis began, has been an issue of like always seeing the women and the children being humiliated, killed, beheaded. And it is very frustrating to know that the work that you do is being watered down. It's why when you are expecting some breakthrough in the peace building work, you instead see that the children and the women are massacred. I mean, it's so frustrating. And my observation is that we need to kind of mainstream trauma healing in the programs of within the programs of women, peace and security, because we are the front line doing the peace building work and meeting all these frustrations. Will need some kind of trauma healing in order to better do the work. So I'm proposing that in addition to every other program that we have within our peace building programs, it is important to look at the aspects of healing the women, healing those who are the front line by offering capacity building on trauma healing, so that they don't go to the field and be confronted with the frustrations and come back and they themselves are not having the peace within. So I think that with this, I shouldn't take all the time, but I just strongly wish that even the peace building funding should kind of ensure that it trickles down to the community actors, the women at the grassroots. We are not feeling the funding. It's not coming down to the local level. I think something should be done at that level in order to be able to ensure that those who are actually doing the work at the community level, where the peace is happening, where even the conflicts are happening, should benefit from this funding. In Cameroon, on the last Saturday was really a blood Saturday to us. Over 7 children were massacred in a school. And and yesterday women were on the streets, they were demonstrating peacefully to call for ceasefire. So how can we as peace builders, global peace builders, women peace builders, ensure that what is happening in one country can be we can have solidarity with the things that are happening in other countries where we all, are supporting. So I really want that coming out of this discussion, we should kind of have a way forward, especially for Cameroon women who are working at the front line. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those very important points, Justine, and also for pointing out the need for trauma healing for peace builders working in the communities, because often we forget that we also need to take care of ourselves. So very well heard also for future programming. I saw Nina wanted to say a few words. I'm just looking at the time to say that we have about 4 minutes for 2 interventions. So keep that in mind. Thank you. Nina, over to you.
Thank you. Very powerful interventions by the women on the ground. I wanted to pick up on 3 aspects and just highlight it. On Shireen's suggestion, which is you hear echoed all the time about the UN perhaps making it obligatory to have women at the peace table and not to just continue accepting that they informally participate as technical advisors or in shadow discussions. That was raised in the 2015 global study, and to my knowledge, the UN really hasn't made a policy decision on this. I'll tell you, historically, the same appeal was made for when the UN supports electoral processes to insist that political parties have a quota for women. So I wanted to flag that and ask whether a more formalized overture by civil society organizations, if that's the common sentiment, might be considered. Secondly, a Canadian colleague mentioning the action plan that's being made, being formulated for the Peacebuilding Commission, which I assume would then have buy-in by member states because they comprise it. Again, I just flagged how is that going to, given the intersectionality, how is that going to jive with the UN's follow-up on WPS as regards the peace and security field? I flagged that in my article, which I mentioned yesterday. So I think a sort of global action plan, irrespective of smaller action plans, because peace building sphere is overlapping with peace and security, conflict prevention, needs to be considered. And then lastly, as you know, the Secretary General and UN Women have had for the past 2 years an ongoing high-level task force for financing for gender equality. I was asked to be an expert on the advisory group. Speaking candidly, this has gone very slow. I understand it's now out of the advisory group's hands. It's with the ESG's office on an implementation plan. I would flag there, because so many appeals have been made today, that local peace building groups, women's organizations, grassroots organizations, be recipients of financing, that you follow that discussion in that process closely. Because what that task force was looking at is how to make it obligatory across the entire UN system, every entity, to earmark a certain amount of funding for gender equality. This has long been a request in the 2010 SG's report on peace building. This, they asked for 15%, but this is to make it obligatory. And that is still pending. So I think it would be a right time to convey your sentiments as to how do the CSOs fit into that whole framework. So those are the 3 aspects I wanted to flag. Thank you very much. What a rich discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina. And before turning back to our panelists for 1 minute, key responses, recommendations, I want to give the word to Daniela, who asked to have a short intervention. So if you can keep it really brief, Daniela, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Seeing that there is no more time, I will withdraw and I will email the organizer. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Great event.
Thank you, but you can still ask a question or come in with a short.
It was a comment, actually. I believe that even at the level of grassroots organizations and civil society overall, we need to reach out to each other and have a better cooperation between us if we want to absolutely attain the goals that they have been put forward and improve the solutions and support the solutions. We are 3 regional caucus at the level of the UN. I am a member of the North European Caucus of Women, UNNGO, CSW. And I believe that I actually put the address of the caucus in the chat. I think we need to start working closer together and at the faster speed, seeing that COVID-19 has become a real issue for us to implement both the 2030 sustainable goals and the implementation of WPS, including Beijing Plus 25. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I just realized I was muted. So we'll have a little bit of a change in sequence. I would actually like to turn to Vanessa first because of some overlapping events and commitments to provide some key reflections and closing remarks before turning to our panel. So it's good to keep flexibility, and I apologize for this. Over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Maya. I apologize for this kind of last minute request. I've been asked, I'm joining my ambassador in a meeting at 10, and I've just been asked to take over the Zoom link for him at 9:55. So I'm going to have to leave before this ends. This has been really a fascinating discussion, both the comments and briefings, but also the discussion that we're having in the chat as well. So I encourage everyone to take a look if they haven't. You know, just I think so many people have spoken and said things that I would have wanted to say. I just want to reinforce some of the points that were made. First, I think the point about financing. And I think it's really important that we understand that, you know, if the starting point is recognizing and seeing the work that women are doing on the ground already, it's not enough to just ask them to tell us what they think needs to be done. And ask them for their analysis. We need to actually empower their work as implementers or implementing partners as of some of the things we're trying to achieve. And so I'm so happy Sophie was here to talk about the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. I think there's the Peacebuilding Fund is doing certain things, but you know, the scale of what a lot of local organizations need and their ability to use or to access big grants, let alone, or even to use big grants, is really out of sync with what the type of support they need. As someone said, a lot of youth-led organizations operate on a budget of $5,000 a year. You know, donors don't do $5,000 grants, or so it's really good that we're starting to think through creative mechanisms for supporting core funding, for giving core funding to support this work at the local level. Very quickly on the action plan for the Peacebuilding Commission, I think Nina brought up an important point, which is that everything that the PBC does is adopted by consensus under a silence procedure. So what we end up with as an action plan that can be agreed by all 31 members of the PBC, which is a diverse group that includes the P5, is going to be almost, you know, by definition, less than what we would want, right? And so I think the challenge is also to figure out through instituting better working methods, and this is something, there's a lot that the PBC can do that's under the discretion of the chair, and this is something we've been really trying hard to do this year, is to figure out what we can do to just make it a practice that certain things happen, you know. And so we are looking into something like guidance to all briefers, or a guidance note issued by the chair saying, we will expect this of all briefers who come before the PBC. They'll be asked to answer the following questions. And that we keep in mind every time we develop a press statement or advice to the council and something like that. I don't think we're going to get that agreed in an action plan, but it's something we can still try to do. And then, of course, so much that we can do is really the work that's been done, even in the last 5 years, to really advance the WPS agenda, and now the work that's being done to accelerate efforts on the youth peace and security agenda, that's learned so much from what the WPS agenda has done. It gives us a lot of insight into kind of what's like the necessary but not sufficient requirement. We have a lot of frameworks. I had trouble with the quiz as well, with the poll, because in my view, all of those items are included in the frameworks we have, and we're not implementing them. So the challenge is really to implement the frameworks. We have a lot of frameworks. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient for us to make the progress we need. So we need the frameworks, and we need political commitment and buy-in, and we need funding, and we need follow-up. And it's a yes and, not a either or. And so we need top down and we need bottom up. And so I think there's recognizing the limitations that each part of this ecosystem has is important, but also recognizing the space that it operates in, and trying to to build on that comparative advantage. So the PBC is an intergovernmental body of member states in New York. We should be focusing on kind of what blockages happen in New York that you need member states kind of political engagement at the UN to push forward. You know, there's limitations to how much we can do to implement on the ground, but we can support it through the kind of the mandate discussions in New York, the funding discussions in New York, and things like that. There's so much more I would have liked to say. I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to participate. And I'm really sorry I can't stay for the last few minutes of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for those reflections, Vanessa, and we'll record and we'll follow up in different ways to be announced at the end of the event. So there will be more time to zoom in on the final few minutes. Speaking of the final few minutes, I would like now to turn to our panel for very short couple of lines to reflect on key recommendations, to respond to what we have heard also from all the participants today. So maybe just one key takeaway or recommendation coming from you, starting with Shireen.
Yeah, thank you so much. Regarding the peace processes and the questions put forward, I think 1325 came to say no to the victimization of women. So what we are trying to say, and also according to what the Secretary General always calls and recommends in his reports or in his tweets, about the meaningful participation of women. We cannot have the cake and eat it. We cannot have women at the technical group committees and then ask for women to be at the table. We cannot even like give them this perception of victimhood. Also, second quick point, also we cannot bring the same masculine patriarchal political leaders to the table expecting different results. Third, and what I think is also of importance is to try to get also and support the Women, Peace and Security agenda with other agendas, such as the R2P or the ATT, or like things regarding the Peace Building Commission is putting forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shireen. Peaceful, what is your key takeaway from today? Your key recommendation?
Okay, I would like to recommend that there is proper documentation of good practices from local peace builders, and with a documentation leading to information sharing between organizations and women-led peace structures involved in peace processes at the local level, and also strengthening the capacity of women community peace builders, that is financially and technically, to be more vibrant and assertive in their mandates. And I will still also go back to the level of funding, which is a long-term, flexible, sustainable, and accessible funding for local women peace builders. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peaceful. What about you, Mariani?
Yes, thank you, Maya. For me, a strong recommendation is how we would be able to continue this in the next years coming and seeing this through. For coming from the church's perspective, there's so much that we can do, but with not, we need those partnerships to last so that we can make this impact on communities and watch from the grassroots level up and see how these could actually roll out. For me, I guess, yeah, it's just that, and also the sharing of information within organizations and just to see and compare how things are going from one side of the world, and how we can also help each other out in terms of moving forward. So for me, that's about it.
Thank you so much for that, Mariani. I hope we contributed to that information sharing a little bit today. Nina, over to you. The last one from the panel, and we still have one more intervention coming in before we wrap up. So please, Nina, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you all. In fact, yeah, and then the main recommendation lays from our side. Lays on your side, on our side. This is to set up an ad hoc working group. This is to UN to identify urgent actions. Yeah, I'm mostly glad we write first time maybe the issue of reparation measures, reparation of ruined infrastructures for peace. Because at the end of the day, there should be someone to be responsible for these actions. And then the established peace process to guarantee the inclusive and meaningful negotiations with national peace builders and national mediators. And we need recognition of national peace builders and national mediators. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Nina. Considering we are out of time, I will ask you all to bear with me for a few more minutes. I will not do a recap at this point to keep everybody longer online. We'll follow up with all of you with an event summary and a policy brief that we plan to release at the end of the year. However, I know our executive director wanted to comment quickly on funding and resourcing. So instead of me closing, I'll pass it over to you, Darnell. And thank you all for attending. Darnell, please.
Well, thank you, Maya, and thank you all for this really fascinating discussion. I'm really happy to have had the chance to be here with you today. I just had two quick comments, and as I was listening to you and listening to the different discussions, first, I'd like to emphasize the comment that Shireen just made about moving from victimhood into actually bringing the role of women as agents of change and agents of peace. And if that is the role, then, and if we're talking about strengthening infrastructures for peace at the local level, then strengthening the role of women at the local level is key for this. So if we're talking about infrastructures for peace, the role of women as part of this infrastructure is key. And the second point I wanted to make really quick is, we've heard a lot about the need to invest in women's capacities, invest in local capacities, to be able to mobilize local capacities to make the link of the Women, Peace and Security agenda and the peace building agenda. And I just heard Vanessa mentioning before about how some of the funding structure is not right. And I completely agree with that. We see how the funding streams that there are, they do not help to facilitate local capacities for this. And one big example that we have is the UN Peacebuilding Fund. They have been making a good effort in opening up that fund to civil society organizations, etc. However, the way in which it is set up right now and the guidelines that the fund has really prevents any local peacebuilding organization from really standing a good chance of accessing the fund of peacebuilding, of the Peacebuilding Fund. It's really set up, if you look at it, it's really set up for international organizations that open a chapter, that open an office in a particular country. It's really set up for those kind of organizations, and it's not really emphasizing that local element, that need that local organizations have for funding. So just wanted to make this point, because we were talking about the peace building architecture, the links on how to support the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Yes, there is this funding stream that is to support peace building, that is to support gender perspectives, women, etc. But that is impossible to access by local organizations, or not even organizations, local organizations, not even with the support or with the umbrella of an organization like GPPAC. That still is that doesn't make it possible. So also something for the Peacebuilding Commission, for the Peacebuilding Fund, and for the entire review of the peacebuilding architecture to keep in mind in the coming years. With that, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this conversation.
Thank you for joining us, Darnell, and thanks to everybody who bared with us a little bit over time. We look forward to connecting with all of you in the future, to following up and to collaborating in making our shared goal of peace for all and everywhere a reality. Thank you so much, and the recording will be available soon. Goodbye, until soon.
Thank you.